describe it just like you just said it. A white person with a non-white person. A white person with a black person. With, use the word with or against, and or with against, and interacting. That's all. And then describe what the interaction is. I mean, if they're sitting across the table from each other having coffee, then you just say that they're sitting across the table from each other having coffee. You don't call it interracial coffee drinking. You just say there's a black person and a white person having coffee. Black person is drinking coffee. The white person is drinking coffee at the same table. Just describe what you're looking at. But it's not interracial. It's not interracial coffee drinking.
Okay. I'm wondering how I could translate that into a title. Maybe it can't be.
No, well, you just say they're interacting with each other, and then you describe how they're interacting. They're drinking coffee and they're talking to each other, if they are talking. If they're not talking, well, they're not talking. Just describe the action. That's all. Because interracial would not be the correct term. It's not interracial coffee drinking. You know, the coffee has nothing to do with the color of the people. I mean, you know, it's just coffee. One person putting the cup to his or her mouth, and the other person, and they could be doing that standing on a bus stop. I mean, you know, is that interracial? That's why the word segregation and racial integration makes no sense. How do I know when I'm an integrated black person? When I'm standing, they say, well, you're integrated when you are close to white people. Well, how close? 5 inches? 12 miles? What are you talking about? Well, standing next to the white person, now you are integrated. Oh, I'm integrated because I'm standing next to the white person. Well, yeah, you can say that. Well, if you look at it that way, a black person was integrated with a white person in the slave mansion. If you worked in the mansion, I mean, you're now integrated because you're no longer working in the fields, but you're going up to the big house. You're still a slave, but you are sitting at the table, say, if you're bold enough to do that, with the master of the house. The master of the house say, sit down, mammy. Pull up a chair and sit down. I'm going to let you sit at the chair, sit at the table today because it's a holiday. Now, is that integration? I don't think so, or maybe it is. That's why I say the term makes no sense. If they say being nearer, being closer to a white person than you were yesterday or 2 years ago, then what do you mean by close? How close is close? No, the term is racial subjugation, which is what racism is anyway. You're subject to the person. So it has nothing to do with how close you're standing to the person or whether you are drinking coffee and 3 feet away the other person is drinking coffee too. And you're black and the other person is white and you're both drinking coffee. Now, is that interracial coffee drinking? No, that's just coffee drinking. A black person drinking coffee and a white person drinking coffee under the system of white supremacy, period. But the white supremacists invented those terms, interracial, racial segregation, racial integration, without describing in detail exactly what that means. And this is why even today in the schools, they'll say, well, this school, I guess, is an integrated school. But at the same time, like in this morning's Washington Post newspaper here in Washington, D.C., it said that in most places, black students are suspended from school more than white students in a so-called integrated school. So what does that mean? If you're going to use the word, if it's integrated, I mean, you know, I don't understand the term, never have. And I don't understand the term segregated. If segregated means separate from, then black people have never been separate from white people since the beginning of white supremacy. Separate? Well, how separate is separate? Like I said at the beginning of this particular segment, does separate mean you're 4 feet away, 8 feet away, 12 miles away? How separate is separate? Just looking at that word. If you say segregation is the same as separation, how separate is separate? No. The term that is used in the textbook for victims is subjugated. That's a thing that's altogether different. Meaning you are subject to, meaning this person has power over you, and you have no power over them. That's subjugation. Racism is subjugation. There's no such thing as racial integration and racial segregation. If by segregation you mean people are separate, because then you have to get into how separate is separate. Everybody is separate unless you are welded together at birth, like what they call so-called Siamese twins, which is maybe a racist term. I mean, where your arm or your leg or your hip or your head is joined together with another person's head. Now you're not separate, but everybody is separate. Who's normal, under normal conditions, even twins come into the world. They're separate, and they're not the same, not even twins. People who are listening to this program probably know some twins, and they're not the same. Why? Because there's two of them. So-called born at the same time, which there's a question about that too, because technically twins are not born at the same time, even if it's just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second. It's not the same time. And you say they look exactly alike. No, they don't. They just appear to look exactly alike. Why? Because it's two. Might be triplets, quadruplets. They're not the same. They weren't born at the same time, and most likely they won't die at the same time either, and that tells you something, particularly, because one might die 5 years before the other, or 2 days. If they are absolutely the same, they would take that last breath at the same time. So there's something different between the two. And it's supposed to be that way. No two people in the universe are supposed to be the same. That's why each person shouldn't ever want to be someone else, according to the code. Each individual person. Always be yourself, because you are yourself. You were sent here at a certain time, at a certain place, put in a certain position, and given a mission for being here, whether you know what it is or not. But it's part, logically speaking, of our duties to find out what that mission is. I say if you're black and you're born in the system of white supremacy, your mission is to replace white supremacy with something better. That's your reason for being here. That's why you were born under the system of white supremacy. According to what? According to logic. You could have been born 12 million years from now, in which case you would have another mission. How do you know what your mission is? Because it's put right in front of you, and you can't escape it. That's the logical way of looking at it. If that mission is in the form of solving a problem, that problem will be right in front of you. And how do you know that that's the problem you're supposed to be working on? Because every time you move, the problem moves. You can't get away from the problem. So at some point, you have to face the problem. That's the logic. And how did you come to that conclusion? Because if you weren't supposed to be helping to solve that problem, you wouldn't have the problem in the first place. Because whatever created you would not have given you that problem. Because everything that you have is a gift. When you're born in this universe, when I am born in this universe, all of that is a gift. If I don't spend but 5 minutes here or 5 seconds, that's more than I had, because I didn't do anything to get here. A white person once told me, Fuller, you talk like a person who expects someone to give you something. Well, nobody never gave me anything. And I said, well, it's one thing I do know for certain. That statement that you just made is false. You just made a false statement. And then I told him why. I said, I'm looking at you. And you wouldn't be here if nobody ever gave you anything. Nobody ever did anything for you. Because that's what you just said. I said, I wouldn't be looking at you if that was so. I said, generally speaking, if you, for 9 months, you had a free ride and you didn't even know it. That's what I mean by using logic. When people say things, you think about the logic of what they're saying. And the gentleman had to agree. I asked him, was he a 9-month baby? I mean, even if he was a 6-month baby, that's more than he had. And he had a free ride. Someone else was carrying him in the rain. And he didn't feel anything. No pain. Wasn't punching a clock. So if you only spend 9 months in the womb and you come here dead, that's 9 months that you didn't have. And you didn't even know it. So everything is a gift. We're supposed to use these gifts, all of it, to solve problems, if we have problems. And we do have problems, because whatever put us here gave us problems to solve. It must be something instinctive in people who are sitting on the subway and whatnot, working crossword puzzles, or trying to figure out anything like babies do. Because we're put here to figure out things. Why? Because there's plenty to figure out. That's the logic. I hope I didn't deviate from your question.